So I've been thinking a lot lately about this idea that, to succeed, you have to pick one thing and go super deep on it. It's everywhere. We're told from a young age to specialize, to become the absolute expert in one narrow field. And look, there's nothing wrong with that on the surface. We need specialists. But this cultural obsession has created some pretty unfair assumptions about anyone who doesn't fit that mold, the generalist. They're often seen as unfocused, as knowing a little about a lot but not enough about anything important. A jack of all trades, master of none. It's a phrase that's almost always used as an insult, but I think we're missing the other half of that saying. But what if that's a fundamentally outdated way of looking at the world? What if being a generalist, someone who practices integrated learning and connects ideas across different domains, isn't a weakness, but a strategic advantage? The world is getting more complex, not less. Problems rarely stay in their neat little boxes. They spill over, connecting technology with ethics, design with psychology, business with culture. The people who can navigate these intersections, who can see the bigger picture, are becoming more and more valuable. It's not about surface-level knowledge, it's about building a unique, interconnected web of understanding. So, that's what this video is all about. We're going to unpack some of the biggest and most common myths about generalists and this whole concept of integrated learning. We'll look at why the ability to synthesize information from different fields is not just a cool party trick, but a powerful skill for problem solving, innovation, and building a meaningful career in the 21st century. It's time to reevaluate what it means to be an expert, and show why having a broad perspective might just be the smartest way to build for the future. Let's get into it. Alright, so let's start with the biggest one. The classic knock against generalists, that they lack depth. The assumption is that if you're spreading your attention across multiple fields, you're just skimming the surface of each one. You're a tourist, not a resident. You know the buzzwords, but you can't actually build anything. But I think this fundamentally misunderstands what depth can look like. It frames depth as a one-dimensional vertical line. How far down can you dig in one single spot? But for a generalist, depth isn't a line, it's a landscape. It's about building layered understanding across different domains and, crucially, understanding the connections between them. Think of it this way. A specialist might know everything there is to know about a specific type of engine. But a generalist might understand that engine, plus the principles of aerodynamics affecting the vehicle, the material science of the chassis, the user experience of the driver, and the supply chain logistics of the parts. The depth isn't in one component, it's in the system. This integrated learning creates richer, more robust mental models. It's not just knowing the what, it's understanding the how and the why from multiple angles. This kind of contextual depth is incredibly powerful and often leads to insights that a specialist with their head down in one hole might completely miss. So this leads directly into the next myth, that when a tough problem comes up, you always call the specialist. And in a stable, predictable environment where the problem is well defined, that's often true. If my car's transmission fails, I'm not taking it to a philosopher, I'm taking it to a transmission specialist. But here's the thing, most of the world's most interesting and important problems aren't like that. They're complex, messy, and constantly changing. Think about challenges like climate change, misinformation, or designing ethical AI. These aren't narrow technical problems, they are wicked problems with interconnected social, technical, and economic dimensions. In these complex environments, generalists actually have a huge advantage. Because they draw from a wider toolkit of mental models, they're much better at spotting novel patterns and making connections that others don't see. A specialist might reach for the same hammer they always use, but a generalist can look at the problem and say, you know, this doesn't look like a nail. It looks a bit like a screw I saw in this other field, and it has properties of a lever I learned about over here. This ability to adapt, to apply knowledge from one context to another, what's known as far transfer, is where real breakthroughs happen. They excel when the rules of the game are unknown or are actively changing. Okay, so this one feels personal for a lot of people. The idea that if you don't specialize, you're just drifting. You don't have a clear career path. Your resume looks confusing. People ask, so what do you? And you don't have a simple one-word answer. Society loves clear labels. Doctor, lawyer, engineer, it makes things easy to categorize. When you say you're a designer who codes, understands marketing, and is learning about sustainable agriculture, it breaks the script. It feels less legible and therefore less legitimate to some. The assumption is that this lack of a predefined path is a sign of indecision or failure. But here's the reframe. Generalists don't follow a path. They design their own. Their career trajectory might not look like a straight line up a corporate ladder, but it has its own internal logic. It's a path guided by curiosity, purpose, and the pursuit of interesting problems. Instead of fitting into a box, they build a unique constellation of skills that allows them to create new roles for themselves, often at the intersection of established fields. This is where you find people building hybrid careers. The data scientist with a background in journalism who excels at storytelling with data, or the musician who uses their knowledge of engineering to build new kinds of instruments. The path is clear to the person walking it, because it's built on a foundation of what they find meaningful. There's this romantic idea of the Renaissance man, the Leonardo da Vinci type who is just effortlessly brilliant at everything. And because of that, there's a myth that integrated learning is some kind of innate gift. It's a personality type you're born with. You're either a polymath or you're not, and if you're not, you should just stick to your lane. This is super discouraging because it makes this powerful way of thinking seem inaccessible, like it's reserved for a special class of geniuses, but that's just not true. Integrated learning is not a fixed trait, it's a skill, it's a process. And like any skill, it can be learned and cultivated by anyone. The core of it is a practice you could call syntopic learning. It's about intentionally consuming information from different fields around a central theme or question. So instead of just reading 5 books on business, you might read 1 book on business, 1 on biology, 1 on military history, and a novel, all while asking, what can each of these teach me about strategy? You actively look for the overlapping principles, the conflicting ideas, and the hidden metaphors. You're not just collecting information, you're building a dialogue between different domains inside your own head. It's a deliberate practice of making connections, and anyone, literally anyone, can start doing it today. This myth is the cousin of the no clear path argument. It's the idea that someone who is interested in many things must have the attention span of a goldfish. They're seen as, flighty, undisciplined, just jumping from one shiny object to the next without ever really committing. The specialist, by contrast, is seen as the epitome of focus and discipline. They have one goal and they pursue it relentlessly for years. But again, this comes from a very narrow definition of what focus means. It assumes focus has to be on a single isolated topic. But well, there's another, equally valid kind of focus, thematic focus. A generalist might not be focused on learning Python, but they might be deeply focused on the theme of how communities organize themselves. This central question then becomes a lens through which they explore different subjects. They might learn some Python to analyze online communities, study anthropology to understand tribal structures, and read political science to see how movements are built. The subjects are diverse, but they're all connected by a common thread of inquiry. This thematic focus is incredibly powerful because it's driven by intrinsic motivation. It leads to deeper retention and higher engagement because every new piece of knowledge isn't an isolated fact. It's another part of a meaningful puzzle you're trying to solve. Okay, let's get practical. This is the bottom line for a lot of people. This all sounds nice, but will it get me a job? The myth is that companies hire specialists for specific roles, and a generalist's resume is just too confusing for HR departments and hiring managers to understand. We need a front-end developer, not someone who does a little front-end, a little marketing, and a little video editing. And for some very specific siloed roles, that can be true. But it ignores a massive and growing part of the modern job market that is desperate for people who can operate at the intersections. Think about the most valuable roles today. Product manager, you need to understand tech, design, business, and the user. UX researcher, a blend of psychology, data analysis, and design thinking. Growth hacker, a mix of marketing, coding, and behavioral science. These aren't specialist roles, they are integrator roles. The job market isn't just one thing, it's an ecosystem. And while there are niches for specialists, there is an increasing demand for the people who can connect those niches. The problem solvers who can translate between departments, synthesize insights from different teams, and see the whole system. These are often the people who end up in leadership because seeing the whole system is literally the job. And finally, let's talk about the big one, the topic on everyone's mind, AI. The argument goes something like this. AI is getting incredibly good at specialized tasks. It can write code, analyze medical scans, and draft legal documents better and faster than most humans. So, in a world where any specialized knowledge can be automated, the only safe bet is to become the absolute best human specialist in your field. But I think this gets the logic completely backward. AI is the ultimate specialist. It's the logical endpoint of hyperspecialization, and you can't out-specialize the machine. The real competitive advantage for humans in the age of AI isn't going to be performing narrow, repetitive tasks. It will be the things AI struggles with: context, wisdom, creativity, and synthesis. It's the ability to ask the right questions, to define a novel problem, to combine ideas from disparate fields to create something new, and to understand the ethical and human implications of a solution. These are the core strengths of the integrative thinker. While AI is busy optimizing the how, the generalist is uniquely positioned to define the what and the why. In a world flooded with hyper-specialized AI agents, the human who can orchestrate them, integrate their outputs, and provide the overarching vision and judgment will be more valuable than ever. So, after looking at all these myths, what's the big takeaway here? For me, it comes down to this: we need to update our definition of depth. For the last century, depth meant knowing more and more about less and less. It was a vertical pursuit. But the challenges and opportunities of today's world demand a new kind of depth. A horizontal, contextual depth built from connecting ideas across fields. Integrated learning isn't the opposite of depth, it's the new frontier of it. It's about building a unique perspective that no one else has, because no one else has combined the exact same set of interests and skills that you have. If you're someone who has always felt pulled in multiple directions, if you've been told to just pick one thing, or that nobody hires generalists, I hope this gives you a new framework. The world is shifting. The old ladders are being replaced by webs and constellations. The most resilient, innovative, and impactful people in the coming decades will be the integrators, the synthesizers, and the curious minds who refuse to stay in a single box. Your ability to connect and synthesize isn't a bug, it's your most powerful feature. It's your greatest strategic asset. So embrace your diverse interests. Follow your curiosity down those rabbit holes, read weird books, talk to people outside your industry, actively look for the patterns that connect everything. Don't let anyone make you feel unfocused or inadequate because your path doesn't look like everyone else's. Your path is your own, and in a world that increasingly values unique perspectives, the path of the generalist is the one that leads to the future. Thanks for watching. Peace.